Spring Creek Prairie, a unique Nebraska landmark. Mission: to ensure birds and their habitats have a future. The National Audubon Society works tirelessly to preserve them and their environments. At the Spring Creek Prairie Audubon Center, they work to protect the Tallgrass Prairie and the species that live there. History: land acknowledgement. There is a long history of human interaction with the property on which the Spring Creek Prairie Audubon Center now manages for birds and operates a visitor center. This land is both treaty and unceded. There have been other people caring for the Tallgrass Prairie in southeast Nebraska before us, and we know that. We honor the Pawnee, Ottaway, Kansa, and Kiowa who came before us on the land and their contributions to knowledge and culture as we continue their tradition of caring for the prairie and all the wildlife, plants, water, and people that depend on it. Ponca, Omaha, and Winnebago tribes of Nebraska. As you explore the Spring Creek Prairie Audubon Center, please remember that you are standing on the territory of the indigenous peoples who have lived here for thousands of years. Audubon developed Spring Creek Prairie Audubon Center in 1998 on the grounds of the former O'Brien Ranch roughly 20 minutes southwest of Lincoln, Nebraska. The ranch's history is detailed in the attachment. This 850-acre Tallgrass Prairie sanctuary offers nearly 3 miles of walking trails, native prairie grasslands, marshes and ponds, wildflowers and grasses, and wonderful scenic panoramas. Wagon ruts from a 19th century shortcut to the Oregon Trail coexist with over 235 species of birds, 370 species of flora, and other fauna. Our visitor center first established in 2006 to accommodate the increasing demand for our family nature programs, school field excursions, special events, and overall growing popularity. Thousands of people have been exposed to the unique beauty and diversity of the Tallgrass Prairie thanks to our efforts to raise awareness about the importance of protecting this critically endangered ecosystem. The visitor center merges into the natural surroundings of Spring Creek Prairie. The facility demonstrates that understanding is truly the first step toward caring responsibly for our native land and all of its resources through its green design and the way in which its artistically understated appearance complements nature. An interview with Kathy O'Brien took place in Spring Creek Prairie on a bright and beautiful morning in September 2006. The reporter recalls that it was a Saturday, and that an autumn breeze was blowing through the prairie grasses, which were completely seeded and looking their most beautiful. Since their chat took place over a decade ago, he has a hazy recollection of the specifics, but he has pieced together a brief story about Kathy and the O'Brien Ranch using the notes and scraps he took and what memories he could get from me. Volunteer at Spring Creek Prairie and member of DCHS Jane Reincourt applied guilt and pressure that led to the writing of this story, thus she deserves some of the credit, or blame. Former owner and operator of the O'Brien Ranch located about 3 miles south of Denton, Nebraska, Kathy O'Brien passed away in 2013. I have it on good authority that Joseph and Philip O'Brien, Kathy's grandfather and uncle, bought the 600-plus acre ranch in 1901. Although Joseph O'Brien is commonly credited as the ranch's first owner, it was actually Philip and Jim O'Brien who made the initial purchase in 1903. There are 3 Philips, a Joseph, and a James O'Brien buried in St. James Cemetery in Cortland. I don't know which one is Kathy's grandfather and which 2 are her uncles. Philip O'Brien settled in Minnesota after his immigration from Ireland, but his family eventually settled in Nebraska. Philip was wed to Frances, born in 1852, and he passed away in 1939. Nay crap, B. 1871, D. 1949. Both Joseph, born in 1857, and James, born in 1850, passed away in 1929 and 1931, respectively. There was also an Alice O'Brien, 1876 to 1924, buried there who seems to have been married to Joseph. Their stones are separate but match and say father and mother, so it's possible they were the parents of Kathy O'Brien's father, also named Joseph, though the fact that the back of her parents' wedding photo says her mother's name was Frances like Philip's wife adds a layer of confusion. The O'Briens had tenant farmers on the ranch for much of the early and middle 1900s, but Kathy's father eventually decided to move the family in and persuaded the farmers to find new digs. In 1949, Kathy and her parents moved onto the ranch, and it remained in the family until 1998, when Kathy sold it to Audubon, Nebraska, and it was renamed Spring Creek Prairie. Due to its location in one of the state's biggest contiguous acres of Tallgrass Prairie, Audubon, Nebraska set its sights on the O'Brien Ranch. Spring Creek Prairie was identified by the Audubon Society as a prime location for the development of a wildlife sanctuary and visitor center. In 2006, when I visited the grassland and spoke with Kathy, she had returned to the ranch for the grand opening of the Spring Creek Prairie Visitor Center. Since Kathy had some time to kill on a Saturday morning, I took her on a walk through the prairie while we talked about her experiences with barrel racing, horse racing, ranching, companion animals, and other topics of conversation. Despite the fact that Kathy and I had never met, we shared many commonalities. I was raised on a farm just 6 miles east of Kathy's former ranch. 1. My family owned one of her old pickups. 2. I salvaged 2 of her old barns that needed to be raised for the creation of the new visitor center at Spring Creek. 3. I was acquainted with some of Kathy's friends, classmates, and former neighbors. And 4. To be honest, I was a little scared to meet Kathy for the first time because I had heard so many horror stories about her from locals. My friend and I drove by the O'Brien Ranch 20 years ago, but we didn't get out, since his mother informed us the owner didn't like strangers on the property. Another of Kathy's former classmates and pals told me that after finding God, Kathy has become a different person with firm beliefs. While I found out that Kathy was a passionate Christian, I didn't think she was crazy about her faith. It was a pleasure to finally meet Kathy. She chatted me up, patiently fielded my inquiries, and posed for pictures. We took a walk on the prairie with her dog in tow, despite the fact that pets aren't allowed on the trails due to the Audubon Society's regulations. Kathy assured me that despite the rules, she is free to visit the prairie whenever she wants, and that she can bring her pets with her. Kathy had a soft spot for canines and horses. In conversation, Kathy mentioned that she and her horse, Juby, had competed in barrel racing. In an article titled Denton Gal National Champ and Quad, from the Lincoln Star dated July 27, 1969, Kathy O'Brien's career as a barrel racer was described. Graduate of Creighton High School, Kathy grew up on a farm with horses, where she learned the ropes at a young age. She took up amateur rodeo while she was a student at the University of Nebraska and rode in the East Campus Rodeo every year. With the help of the Girls Rodeo Association, GRA, the female counterpart of the Cowboy Rodeo Association, she turned professional 3 years ago, CRA. As a result of her 32 rodeos last year, she took home $6,000. That's not net, Kathy clarified. It's expensive to get to each rodeo and even more so to bring a horse along. Kathy's trusted work steed is a 7-year-old quarter horse named Juby. With an eye toward the future, Kathy has recently purchased a young horse named Bar Joy, also known as BJ. It's time-consuming to train a champion performance, Kathy added. Garments are another major expense for a professional rodeo performer. According to rodeo regulations, participants must dress attractively at all times. Bell-bottoms made of cotton paired with cotton shirts are a popular choice for the summer months, while satin and lame are more popular during the winter months. However, there are definite positives to this kind of living as well, Kathy argued. To put it simply, I can go whenever I want to, wherever I want to. Unlike many others, I am not bound to an 8-hour workday, and I am compensated for engaging in activities that many people like doing in their spare time. Barrels races may move at a faster clip than other rodeo events, but the high stakes of competitiveness and the high level of ability necessary make this a sport in which anything may happen. In 1968, at the National Rodeo Finals in Oklahoma City, Kathy won the barrel racing championship, besting her fellow Nebraskan Kay Whitaker of Valentine. Kathy paid a visit to her mother, Mrs. Joe O'Brien, last week when she was at home. Unfortunately, her father has passed away. She will spend the rest of the summer traveling to rodeos in the states surrounding Nebraska, and she left again on Tuesday for one in Kansas City. Kathy's January purchase has already seen 19,000 miles of travel. She rode Juby much, too, and she gave him a lot of practice going swiftly and accurately around the rodeo arena's barrels. In order to run her successful barrel racing business, Kathy relied on the O'Brien Ranch. There was an entire horse barn on the farm, complete with stalls for the horses, a hayloft, tack room, and an office. In addition, there was a sizable open shed with a spacious outside arena where she and the horses could work on their skills to compete in rodeos and other barrel racing events. Kathy drove all over the country. Claude and Margie Lynch Strello were tenant farmers on the ranch until 1949, when Kathy's parents moved there permanently. The Strellos farmed roughly 110 acres of the ranch, while the rest was prairie grass, according to Everett Smith, Claude Strello's nephew, and a longtime member of DCHS. Smith, as a child, spent a lot of time at the ranch, and he recalled some of his experiences there in a DCHS presentation on the Strello families of the Denton region given on April 23, year not known. When visiting his aunt and uncle, Smith would take long walks across the O'Brien Ranch. He claimed, when the O'Brien family relocated to the ranch, he said, the Strellos moved to a farm to the south of the prairie that he called the Schultz place, which Claude eventually bought. Audubon, Nebraska has since purchased a portion of the former Schultz farm and is in the process of restoring the prairie there. My friend Kathy said that Claude was reluctant to leave the O'Brien property, but that her father eventually convinced him to make the move. The mother of Kathy suffered several miscarriages. A Catholic social service agency in Council Bluffs, Iowa was responsible for Kathy's adoption. Prior to settling on the ranch, Kathy and her family made their home in Princeton, Nebraska. While ranch life was rewarding for Kathy's mother, it presented its fair share of difficulties, she recalled. Fences, according to Kathy, are perpetual maintenance projects. A number of dams had been constructed around the farm to prevent erosion and provide water for the livestock, but they were frequently destroyed by the frequent downpours. Despite the fact that the majority of the farm or ranch had been tilled, there were still some sections where the prairie hadn't been plowed through. Kathy claimed that the places where alfalfa had been planted had produced high-quality hay. While out walking, Kathy and I sat atop the hill where she had buried her horse, Juby, and 3 of her pets. Back while she still resided at the ranch, Kathy had erected 3 massive crosses on the hill where she held Easter services, but those crosses have now disappeared. A gravestone, partially constructed from horseshoes, stood at the edge of the cemetery, not far from a deteriorating section of split rail fencing, marking the area where Juby was laid to rest. When Kathy saw the state of the fence, she was so disheartened that she offered to give my son and I $100 to fix it. My son and I spent the next 2 days cutting down osage trees for their rustic hedge logs and reconstructing the fence. Many visitors to the prairie stop at the fence and tiny cemetery there to take in the breathtaking scenery. Kathy was faced with the difficult decision of what to do with the 600-plus acre Tallgrass Prairie ranch that had been in her family for almost a century, because the ranch's income wasn't sufficient to cover the expenditures of maintenance required to manage and repair aged fences and buildings. The native grasses, wildlife, and sections of the ranch that had never been plowed attracted Nebraska Audubon, who purchased the O'Brien ranch from Kathy in 1998. Kathy wanted the land to be preserved as much as possible, so she entrusted Nebraska Audubon to take care of it. Since the O'Brien ranch was sold, many of the surrounding properties have been bought up and converted to Tallgrass Prairie. Wagon ruts from the historic east-west migration and freighter trails can be found on the O'Brien Ranch, which also features hundreds of acres of untouched native prairie. The O'Brien Ranch was traversed by the extensively frequented Fort Kearney Cutoff, a section of the Oregon Trail between Nebraska City and Ft. Kearney. During the years 1862 to 1868, the unique characteristics of Spring Creek Prairie draw in tourists interested in both history and the outdoors. When Kathy sold the ranch, she went to Oklahoma, and as far as I know, that's where she currently resides at the time of this writing. During the weekend of our visit in 2006, the Spring Creek Prairie Visitor Center was dedicated in Kathy's honor. The visitor center was built in part with materials recycled from a shed that once stood on the same plot of land.